It was a cold Thursday morning in downtown Chicago when Jeff Bezos, wearing a nondescript hoodie and jeans, stepped into a McDonald's near the corner of Wabash Avenue. No one recognized him at first. The staff were too busy rushing to fill orders for the breakfast crowd: Egg McMuffins, hash browns, and steaming cups of coffee. It was 7:42 a.m. Bezos, always a man of precision, noted the time. He wasn't here for breakfast. He was here for something far more unusual. Earlier that week, Jeff had been in a boardroom in Seattle, staring out a glass window while his team presented a quarterly report. He wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere, trapped in a memory from 1980, when he was 16 and flipping burgers in a McDonald's in Miami. That job had taught him more than any school ever did, he often claimed. Discipline, systems, efficiency. But now, with a net worth north of $180 billion, he was back, not to reminisce, but to experiment. Bezos had been quietly working on a personal project. Not a rocket, not a drone, not a super yacht. This time, it was human-centered. He wanted to answer a question that had nagged at him for years. What if leadership could be reverse-engineered by working the lowest rung again? Could he, the richest man in the world, go incognito, return to the trenches, and relearn the mechanics of frontline labor in a modern fast food environment? So he walked up to the counter. The cashier, Maria, didn't even look up when she asked, "For here or to go?" Jeff smiled. "Actually, I'd like to apply for a job." Maria blinked. "What?" "I want to work here. Part-time." They thought it was a prank. A hidden camera show, maybe. But Jeff pulled out a fake ID, name, Jeffrey Preston. He had already submitted a perfectly average resume online, listing his last job as a warehouse clerk in Albuquerque. He'd shave his head bald like he used to, wore contacts instead of glasses, and had grown a trimmed beard to offset his famously recognizable face. The manager, Tom, shrugged. They were short-staffed anyway. "You ever worked in fast food before?" "Yeah," Jeff said truthfully. "A long time ago." And so began one of the most bizarre 6 weeks in the history of fast food. Bezos started on fries. It was humbling. The pace was intense. The oil splattered. His shift supervisor, an 18-year-old named Kyle, barked instructions without a hint of respect. "Yo, Preston, that's too much salt, man. Start over." Jeff nodded. "Got it." He didn't try to impress anyone. He kept his head down. But at night, in his hotel room, he scribbled in a leather notebook. Observations, patterns, bottlenecks. He wasn't just working. He was studying. Obsessively. By the second week, he was on drive-through duty. Customers complained about slow service. One woman threw her coffee at the window because the cream was missing. Jeff didn't flinch. He simply said, "I apologize for that," with perfect calm. He watched how co-workers like Jasmine and Omar adapted under pressure. Jasmine, a single mother of 2, had developed a mental algorithm to process 4 orders at once. Omar, just out of high school, had hacked the POS system to make it respond faster by using keyboard shortcuts no one else noticed. Jeff began helping quietly, cleaning trays without being asked, refilling the soda machine when others ignored it. He was becoming respected. Then, something changed. Week 4. A corporate executive from McDonald's HQ visited for a routine inspection. Her name was Linda Marquez. As she observed operations, she paused at the drive-thru window. Her eyes narrowed. "Preston," she said. Jeff froze. Linda had interned at Amazon 20 years ago. She recognized the voice. "What the hell are you doing here?" she whispered. Jeff smiled. "Research." Linda laughed. "Jesus Christ." She agreed to keep his secret on one condition. He'd sit down with her for coffee at some point and explain everything. He promised. 2 days later, Bezos initiated what he called the experiment. Without revealing his identity, he convinced the team to re-engineer the order process. He broke the shift into microcycles, 15-minute bursts of focus with 1-minute cooldowns. He introduced a new rotation method that kept fatigue low. He used sticky notes to communicate silently across stations. Sales went up. Errors went down. The store became the highest performing location in the region for 1 week. Tom, the manager, was stunned. I don't know what the hell is happening, but it's working. When Jeff finally revealed himself, after his 6th week, during an after-hours team dinner, there was silence. Complete, stunned silence. Wait, Kyle said, you're the Jeff Bezos? Jeff nodded. I called you a moron 3 times last week. Jeff laughed. And you weren't wrong. He handed Tom a letter. Inside was a personal offer. Amazon would fund college tuition for every current employee at that location. No strings attached. The story exploded. But only later, much later. At first, no one believed it. Some still don't. But Linda confirmed it in an interview years later. And the Chicago McDonald's on Wabash? It became a legend in corporate circles. To this day, employees talk about the strange man named Preston who came in, changed everything, and walked out as quietly as he arrived. What he did will shock you, but not because of the money. Because he listened, because he remembered, and because, even as the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos wanted to be a better worker. But the story didn't end there. Months after the incident, a strange trend started rippling through corporate America. CEOs were showing up in disguise, volunteering for low-level roles in their own companies. It was being called the Preston Protocol, an homage to Bezos' alias. A fast food shift manager in Atlanta reported seeing a man who looked suspiciously like Elon Musk mopping floors. Another claimed Tim Cook worked the salad bar at a tech cafeteria in Palo Alto for a week. Suddenly, empathy was back in style. Bezos himself stayed quiet about the whole thing. He refused interviews, declined invitations. When asked in a rare appearance if the McDonald's story was real, he simply smiled and said, I learned a lot about salt. Meanwhile, the Wabash McDonald's became a hub for innovation. Tom was promoted to regional manager. Jasmine started an online course teaching customer service strategies. Omar was offered a software internship at Amazon. And Maria? She opened her own coffee shop, Preston's Cup, just down the street. But perhaps the most telling outcome was Kyle. The once blunt teenager now ran team-building workshops for new hires. He told every class the same story. Don't underestimate anyone. That fry cook you're yelling at might just own the building. And somewhere, in a quiet corner office, Jeff Bezos flipped through an old leather notebook, smiled, and closed it. There was nothing left to prove, just something important to remember. A year later, Jeff returned to Chicago, not as Preston, not undercover, but as himself. The McDonald's on Wabash had undergone a quiet transformation. Nothing flashy, but you could feel it. The air buzzed with purpose. Smiles came more naturally. New posters lined the walls, ones about teamwork, initiative, and something called the shift sprint, a method borrowed directly from Bezos' microcycle model. He didn't come to make a speech. He simply walked in, ordered a black coffee, and sat at the same table he'd watched the team from on that first morning. Tom spotted him and shook his head with a grin. Could have given us a heads up, he said. Jeff chuckled. I liked the surprise last time. They sat quietly for a few minutes, just watching the team in action. Omar's little brother was now on fries. Jasmine had taken over as assistant manager. And Kyle? He was standing with a new trainee, showing her how to time her moves at the sandwich station. You know, Tom said, we used to burn out new hires in 3 weeks. Now we retain 80% after 3 months. We even had someone turn down a job at a bank to stay here. Said she felt seen. Jeff didn't say anything. He just sipped his coffee and nodded. Later that day, a quiet donation was made to a citywide job training program. No press, no plaque, just results. But the ripple didn't stop in Chicago. Stories started appearing in LinkedIn posts and internal newsletters from unexpected places. A CFO working customer service at a call center. A hedge fund manager shadowing the custodial staff at his headquarters. A luxury hotel executive spending 3 weeks in housekeeping. The phrase, doing a Preston, became corporate slang for stepping into the shoes of the people who kept the engine running. Not everyone did it well. Some treated it as PR, but a few enough did it right. They listened, they learned, and they left with a little more humility. And Jeff, he went back to his ventures. Quietly, he kept building rockets, kept innovating. But once a year, he'd vanish for a few weeks. No one knew where he went. Rumors said he took on new jobs: janitor, night stalker, taxi driver, always under a new name. He never confirmed or denied them. But in the margins of one old notebook, scribbled in faded ink, were 3 simple lines. Be small to lead big. Ask more than you answer. No job is beneath a builder. The rest of the pages were blank, waiting, perhaps, for the next story. 3 years later, the world had changed more than anyone expected. The ripple effect of the Preston Protocol had grown into a quiet cultural shift across industries. It didn't dominate headlines anymore, but in the background, workplaces began evolving just a little. Hierarchies softened. Listening became fashionable again. And buried within quarterly goals and performance reviews was something unexpected: curiosity. In a small business school in Des Moines, a professor named Lila Chun introduced a new leadership seminar. Its centerpiece? A case study titled The Disguised Billionaire. Her students debated the ethics, the strategy, the human impact. Was it manipulation or genuine immersion? But what caught their attention most wasn't Bezos's wealth. It was his willingness to disappear into the noise. And then something peculiar happened. A grainy, silent security camera clip began circulating anonymously online. It showed a janitor cleaning the lobby of a startup incubator in Austin. He moved with quiet efficiency, took no phone calls, ate lunch alone. Then, one evening, he walked into a pitch session, not as a janitor, but as a potential investor. The founders stared, confused, until he said, "I've been watching. You treat your people right. Let's talk." The clip went viral. Speculation ran wild. Was it Bezos again? Or someone else adopting his method? The comments debated endlessly, but no one ever claimed it. And Bezos? He stayed silent as always. Back in Chicago, Maria's Cafe, Preston's Cup, thrived. It became a gathering place for workers from every walk of life: baristas, rideshare drivers, coders, janitors. She hosted a shift talk series every Thursday night, where people shared their wildest customer stories and toughest days. The only rule? No job shaming. One rainy evening, an older man walked in, soaking wet, and asked for something hot and strong. Maria served him without blinking. He sat in the corner, watching, listening, and when the night ended, he left a $10,000 tip with a note. The best ideas are brewed here. Keep pouring. JP. The employees stared at the signature. No one knew if it was really him, but they framed the note anyway. Elsewhere, Kyle had written a book, Burnt Fries and Billionaires. It wasn't a bestseller, but it found a loyal audience: young managers who wanted to lead with empathy, not ego. He toured high schools, talking about emotional intelligence, and always ended his talk with the same line: "The best boss I ever had worked fries next to me and took criticism like a champ." In the Amazon headquarters, a new onboarding program was introduced. Every new VP spent 1 week shadowing fulfillment center workers anonymously. The idea was controversial at first. Some called it performative, but the results were undeniable: better communication, more responsive leadership, and fewer resignations. In time, the McDonald's where it all began was given a small plaque near the back door. Not out front, not visible to customers, just for the team. It read, "Innovation isn't always invented. Sometimes it's remembered." JB and Jeff. No one really knew where he went. Some said he was traveling the country by train, alone, striking up conversations in diner booths and rest stops. Others believed he'd returned to Miami, quietly living among the places where he'd once flipped real burgers as a teenager. But the notebook, his leather notebook, resurfaced once more. This time at a charity auction in Seattle, anonymously donated. Inside were dozens of pages filled with names. Not projects, not patents. Names. People. Stories. Tiny human moments from shift floors and break rooms. A folded sticky note on the final page read, "Leadership isn't found in corner offices. It's handed to you in moments no one else sees." The notebook sold for $1.8 million. The winning bidder was Maria. When asked what she'd do with it, she said, "I'm going to leave it in the break room." And she did. 10 years had passed since that morning on Wabash Avenue. The world had cycled through economic highs and lows, technological revolutions, pandemics, and political shifts. But one thing remained consistent in whispers and coffee shop stories: the Preston moment. At a tech conference in Singapore, a young CEO named Ravi Mehta shared a peculiar slide. It was a photo of a mop bucket. No explanation. Then he told his story. How, after reading Burnt Fries and Billionaires, he spent 4 weeks anonymously working nights in the server room of his own company. He discovered that the graveyard shift crew had invented a faster error detection system that the day engineers had ignored for months. He implemented it, and their output tripled. Leadership, Ravi said, isn't about making decisions. It's about discovering them. The audience, mostly 20 and 30-something founders, sat in stunned silence. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in a small town in rural France, a quiet man named Jean ran a gas station. He paid above minimum wage, let employees pick their shifts, closed on Sundays. And every month, he hosted a "Tell Me Something I Don't Know" lunch where anyone, cleaners, cashiers, delivery drivers, could pitch one business idea. It was a local curiosity. Then one of those ideas, an eco-packaging concept pitched by a 19-year-old cashier named Elise, got picked up by a global distributor. When reporters showed up, Gene refused interviews. But someone noticed a small framed photo in his back office. Jeff Bezos in a McDonald's cap, holding a bag of fries. No question, no explanation. Back in the U.S., the business school curriculum shifted. Case studies once focused solely on Amazon's logistics or pricing strategies now included the Wabash transformation. Professors debated whether it had been a PR stunt or a sincere rediscovery. But the most telling evidence wasn't academic. It was generational. An entire cohort of young professionals had grown up hearing the story. For them, the idea that a CEO might bag groceries or clean restrooms wasn't absurd. It was admirable. New companies emerged with policies requiring executives to shadow entry-level roles quarterly. It wasn't mandated by law. It didn't come from HR consultants. It came from Preston. Somewhere in New Mexico, Jeff Bezos lived in a minimalist adobe house surrounded by desert. He rarely appeared in public. His Amazon role had long since passed to others. But once in a while, a letter would arrive at a manager's desk or a cafeteria bulletin board with no return address. Always handwritten, always ending with the same phrase. Keep asking the small questions. They lead to big things. And once, just once, a former Amazon executive, now retired, took a cross-country road trip and stopped at a diner off Route 66. The cook looked oddly familiar. But tall, kind eyes, didn't speak much. When the executive left, there was a note on his receipt. "I remember your first quarterly report. You were too hard on yourself. Glad you're smiling now. Yotpe." The executive never revealed the location. The story lived on. And for the people who worked the night shift, who served drive-through orders, who stocked shelves and cleaned spills, there was a strange comfort in the idea that someone somewhere who had everything had once stood exactly where they stood. Not to watch, but to learn, to remember, to listen. And that was the part that shocked people the most. Not the money, not the fame, but the fact that the richest man in the world had chosen to be, for a moment, just another worker. And the world hadn't been quite the same since. Years faded, as years do. The world marched forward faster than ever. New industries rose. AI, quantum computing, biointegrated tech. The names on Fortune 500 lists changed. Old giants fell, nimble players rose. But in pockets of the world, coffee shops, locker rooms, night shifts, stories of Preston endured like folklore. In a museum in D.C., buried in a quiet corner exhibit on modern work culture, there was a display titled, "The Fry Station That Changed Everything." It was a perfect replica of the back line at McDonald's Wabash Avenue in 2025. Tongs, heat lamps, grease-stained note cards taped to the side of the stainless steel wall. And in the center, under glass, a worn McDonald's visor with Preston stitched onto it. Visitors read the plaque and laughed. Some rolled their eyes, but others lingered, especially those who'd worn a name tag at some point in their life. They understood. At the very back of the exhibit was a short video, grainy footage of a team huddle. The voice giving the pep talk wasn't loud. It wasn't trying to motivate with theatrics. It simply said, "We serve people, and if we do it well, we serve purpose." Then fade to black. Far away, on a quiet beach in the Pacific, a man walked the shore with a notebook in his hand. His gait was slower now, his back a little hunched, but his eyes were still sharp, always observing. He stopped at a beach cafe run by a young couple, first-time business owners, stressed over their inventory system crashing mid-lunch rush. The man offered to help. They didn't recognize him. Just a kind stranger who calmly reorganized their manual receipts, suggested a handwritten cue, and even ran food to tables while they caught their breath. When it was all over, they thanked him profusely. He simply smiled and said, "Just passing through." That evening, as they were closing up, the couple found an envelope taped to the fridge. Inside, $50,000 in seed funding. And a note. "You already have what the great ones forget. Humility. Now go build." Preston. They never saw him again, but they kept the envelope framed. And one day, when a nervous teenager asked for his first job at their cafe, the owner handed him an apron and said, "Let me tell you a story. It started in a McDonald's, and somewhere, maybe watching from afar, or maybe just forgotten in the wind, Jeff Bezos closed a notebook filled with thousands of moments like these, quiet moments, invisible impact." He didn't need statues. He didn't need headlines. He had the one thing money couldn't buy. He had mattered, not as a billionaire, not as a mogul, but as Preston, the man who came to work, the man who listened. And so, maybe the real shock wasn't that Jeff Bezos worked at McDonald's. Maybe it wasn't the grease-stained apron or the fake name tag or the 2 a.m. Fry Station epiphanies. Maybe the real shock is that for once, power stepped down, not to teach, not to dominate, but to learn, to listen, to remember what it feels like to be unseen, and to make that visibility sacred again. Because somewhere beneath the billions, the rockets, the boardrooms, and the headlines was a teenage boy from Miami who once flipped burgers and dreamed bigger than anyone dared. And maybe, just maybe, he never stopped needing to understand the people who made those dreams possible. So the next time you hear the beep of a fryer, the rustle of a paper bag, or the call of an order number under flickering fluorescent lights, remember, greatness doesn't always arrive in a limousine. Sometimes it clocks in on the morning shift. Years later, long after the McDonald's on Wabash had been renovated, rebranded, and digitized beyond recognition, a young journalist named Claire found herself chasing a lead. She'd heard about the Preston Protocol during an interview with a retired Amazon logistics coordinator. Curious, skeptical, she dug deeper. Most people gave her shrugs. Some said it was a myth, a fable. Others swore it happened, pointed to blurry photos, half-deleted forum posts, a single archived interview with Linda Marquez where she simply said it wasn't about who he was. It was about what he chose to become. Claire found herself at a small coffee shop near Wabash. The sign outside read, "Preston's Cup." Inside, the walls were covered with handwritten notes from customers, stories of kindness, resilience, and change. Behind the counter, an older woman poured her a coffee and asked what brought her in. "I'm looking for the truth," Claire said. "About Preston, about Jeff Bezos, about what really happened here." The woman smiled softly. "Some truths aren't in records. They're in people. She pointed to a laminated card taped near the register. It was faded, nearly unreadable. But Claire squinted and made it out. Don't just build. Remember, don't just lead. Listen, don't just rise. Return. JP. Claire sat there for a long time, staring at that card. No headline, no scoop, no viral story. Just a whisper of something bigger than fact. A few months later, her article was published in a quiet corner of a tech ethics magazine. It was called The Man Who Came Back to Work. It didn't trend. It didn't go viral, but it found the people it needed to find. A night janitor in Detroit printed it out and taped it to his cart. A burned-out product manager in Seoul read it and resigned the next morning to start teaching. A teenage cashier in Kansas City kept it folded in his pocket like a lucky charm. And somewhere, far away from cameras, from articles, from empires, a man in his 70s closed a dog-eared notebook for the last time, stood from his porch chair, and watched the sun set over the quiet hills. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The world was already listening. Fade out. Black screen. Text appears slowly. Impact isn't measured in wealth. It's measured in footsteps quietly retraced. Final line, a whisper from the narrator. And sometimes, the richest man in the world is the one who remembers where he started.